The screen door hit the frame behind you before your shoes were off. 3:15 on a Wednesday, and your hand was already in the pantry. No one checked the label. No one measured a portion. You grabbed whatever was on the second shelf and ate it in front of the television until dinner. In the 1970s, the hour between school and supper belonged to you and whatever the grocery store had put on sale that week. One cereal on this list put a clown on the box that an entire generation still remembers. And the snack at number 12 disappeared so completely that grown adults started writing letters to bring it back. These were not meals, they were rituals, and almost every one of them is gone. Here are 30 after-school snacks from the 1970s that quietly vanished. Number 30, Screaming Yellow Zonkers. The box was black with neon yellow letters, and it looked like nothing else on the grocery shelf. Lincoln Snacks made this glazed popcorn starting in the late 1960s, and by the mid-1970s, it was one of those things you grabbed without thinking. The coating was buttery and sweet with a crunch that regular popcorn could not touch. You tore open the top of the box and ate straight from it while watching Gilligan's Island reruns. There was a whole paragraph of comedy writing on the back of every box, and some kids read that more carefully than their homework. The brand faded out by the early 1980s. No announcement, no farewell tour. One day, the shelf just had something else where the black box used to be. Number 29, Space Food Sticks. Pillsbury launched these as a tie-in to the Apollo missions, and for a few years in the early 1970s, eating one made you feel like you were training for something important. They came in chocolate, peanut butter, and caramel. Each one was a dense, chewy stick wrapped in foil. The taste was somewhere between a protein bar and a Tootsie Roll, and you did not eat them because they were delicious. You ate them because astronauts ate them, or at least that was what the commercial said. They were the only snack in your lunchbox that made other kids ask questions. By the time the Space Shuttle program started, nobody was buying them. The space age moved on, and the snack aisle moved with it. Before I go any further, for the folks who want recipes like these and a whole lot more in one place, I put together the Vintage Recipe Guide. You can find it on my website, vintagelifestyleusa.com. I will not bring it up again in this video. If you want it, it is right there. Now back to the list. Number 28, Funny Face Drink Mix. Pillsbury made these to compete with Kool-Aid, and the mascots were the selling point. Goofy Grape, Rootin' Tootin' Raspberry, Loudmouth Lime. The packets cost almost nothing, and you mixed them with water and a generous amount of sugar in whatever pitcher was clean. The original lineup had two characters with names that did not age well, and Pillsbury quietly renamed them by the mid-1970s. But the drink was everywhere for a while. You mixed a pitcher after school, poured it into a glass, and drank it standing at the counter before going outside. By the early 1980s, the brand was gone. Kool-Aid had won the war, and Funny Face quietly surrendered. Number 27, Kugel Peanut Butter. Kraft put peanut butter in a jar with a wide, googly-eyed face on the label and flavored it. Chocolate, vanilla, banana, and cinnamon. The chocolate one spread like frosting and tasted close enough to candy that your mother probably should have looked at it twice. You ate it on white bread, you ate it off a spoon, or you stuck a finger straight into the jar while nobody was looking. Kraft pulled it from shelves by the late 1970s. Flavored peanut butter was either ahead of its time or behind it. Either way, those jars with the big eyes staring back at you from the pantry shelf are gone. Number 26, Wacky Wafers. Giant candy discs about the size of a silver dollar stacked in a cellophane roll. Wonka made them in 5 flavors, and the green one was watermelon, which was the only reason most kids bought the pack. The texture was hard and chalky on the outside and slightly softer once you bit through. You did not chew them. You let them dissolve on your tongue during a rerun of the Brady Bunch, working through 1 disc per commercial break. The whole roll cost $0.25 at the drugstore. Wonka discontinued them, and the watermelon flavor became one of those taste memories that nothing in the candy aisle quite replaces. Number 25, Quisp Cereal. Quaker Oats put a pink alien on the box and made the cereal taste like Cap'n Crunch, but in a flying saucer shape. The pieces were round and slightly puffed, and they did not tear up the roof of your mouth the way the captain's did. You poured a bowl the second you walked in the door and ate it dry in front of the television? Or you added milk and let it sit until it went soft? Quisp had a rivalry with its own sister cereal, Quake, and Quaker ran contests letting kids vote for their favorite. Quisp won every time. It still disappeared from most store shelves by the late 1970s. Winning the popular vote did not save it from the accountants. Number 24. Freaky's Cereal. Ralston Purina put 7 strange creatures on the box and gave each one a name: Boss Moss, Cow Mumble, Ham Hose, Grumble, Goody Goody, Snorkeldorf, and Gargle. The cereal was sweetened corn puffs, and the real draw was the toy inside. Every box had a small plastic Freaky figure, and kids collected all 7. You opened the box upside down to get the toy first, ate a bowl standing at the counter, then forgot about the cereal until the next afternoon. Ralston pulled the line by the late 1970s, but those little plastic figures showed up in junk drawers for years. The cereal was average. The characters were the product. Nobody called it a meal. It did not have a name on any menu or in any cookbook. But every kid who walked through the front door in the 1970s had a routine between the school bus and dinner. You checked the pantry, checked the fridge, and assembled something out of whatever was there. There was no plan, and there were no portions. Your mother was still at work or on the phone in the other room, and the kitchen belonged to you for exactly 1 hour. That hour shaped how a generation thinks about food. Not nutrition, not health, comfort. The feeling of standing in a quiet kitchen with the afternoon light on the linoleum and the whole evening still ahead of you. Those snacks were never about hunger. They were about the pause between the outside world and the inside of your house. Number 23. King Vitamin Cereal. Quaker Oats made this one with a cartoon king on the box who looked like he had been drawn during a lunch break. The cereal was oat-based with a light sweetness, and the selling point was the name: vitamins. Your mother bought it because the word was right there on the front. You ate it because it was in the cabinet and the good stuff was gone. King Vitamin was never the cereal you asked for. It was the cereal that showed up when everything else was sold out. It hung on longer than most, appearing on regional shelves well into the 1990s, but the golden years were the 1970s when every grocery store stocked it, and no child was excited about it. Number 22. Kaboom Cereal. General Mills put a clown on the box, not a soft, friendly circus poster clown. A wide-eyed, full-color clown with a grin that sat somewhere between cheerful and unsettling. His name was just the Kaboom Clown, and he stared at you from the cereal aisle of every grocery store from the early 1970s onward. The cereal itself was star-shaped pieces in bright colors, heavily sweetened, and it turned the milk pink. You did not eat Kaboom because it was the best cereal on the shelf. You ate it because the box grabbed your attention and your mother put it in the cart to stop you from reaching for something worse. The taste was standard sweetened corn, interchangeable with half a dozen other brands. But that clown was not interchangeable with anything. He was the thing you remembered. Years later, adults brought up Kaboom not because of the flavor, but because of the face on the box that watched them eat breakfast through an entire childhood. There was something off about it. The colors were too saturated. The smile was too wide. The eyes followed you across the table. And the cereal was just sweet enough that you kept eating while the clown kept staring. General Mills discontinued Kaboom by the mid-1980s. The cereal market had moved on to movie tie-ins and licensed characters, and a grinning clown on a plain box did not compete anymore. But everyone who sat at a kitchen table with that box facing them remembers exactly what it looked like. Some things leave the shelf and you barely notice. Kaboom left the shelf and left the clown behind, somewhere in the back of your memory, still grinning. Number 21. Like M-Aid. This was the original version of what eventually became Fun Dip, and in the 1970s, it was its own product. The package had pouches of flavored sugar powder and a white candy stick you used to scoop it out. You licked the stick, dipped it into the powder, and repeated until your tongue turned bright red or blue and the pouch was empty. The candy stick tasted like compressed chalk with a faint sweetness, and you ate that too. Every kid had a technique. Some went straight for cherry. Some mixed everything into a purple mess. The name changed, the packaging evolved, and the product survived in a different form, but the original Lick-M-Aid pouch from the 1970s is a different thing than what you find on the rack today. Number 20. Space Dust Candy. This was the finer, powdery cousin of Pop Rocks, and it arrived in the mid-1970s riding the same carbonated candy technology. You poured the packet onto your tongue, and it fizzed and crackled and made your whole mouth feel electric. The sensation lasted about 10 seconds, just long enough to make you open another packet. General Foods marketed it right alongside the space craze. Then the rumors started. Kids mixing it with soda and ending up in emergency rooms, stomachs exploding. None of it was true, but the story spread through every schoolyard in America faster than any commercial could. The rumors did what no competitor managed. They scared parents into leaving it on the shelf. General Foods pulled the name. Number 19. Fiddle Faddle. Lincoln Snacks made this caramel-coated popcorn in a box that looked almost identical to Cracker Jack, which was the point. The difference was no prize inside and a thicker, crunchier coating. You ate it by the handful after school, digging through the box for the biggest clusters where the caramel had glued 4 or 5 kernels together. Those clusters were the treasure. The single-coated pieces were fine, but the clusters were why you kept reaching in. Lincoln Snacks also made Screaming Yellow Zonkers, higher on this list, and between the two, they owned the caramel popcorn shelf for most of the decade. Fiddle Faddle changed hands between companies over the years and quietly shrank its box size. The version you remember, full size with the thick clusters, is gone. Number 18. The Reggie Bar. Standard Brands made this candy bar for Reggie Jackson after his legendary World Series performance in 1977. 3 home runs in one game. The bar showed up the following spring. Round, flat, chocolate-covered with a peanut and caramel center. When the Yankees handed them out on opening day, fans threw them onto the field after Jackson's first home run. Thousands of candy bars raining down on the outfield grass. It was the greatest piece of free advertising any snack ever received. The candy itself was decent, but unremarkable. The story was the entire product. Standard Brands sold it for a few seasons, and then it was gone. The bar was temporary. That moment on the field is permanent. Number 17. Fruit Brute Cereal. General Mills launched this as the 4th monster cereal after Count Chocula, Frankenberry, and Boo Berry. The mascot was a werewolf in overalls, and the cereal had fruit-flavored marshmallow bits with oat pieces. It arrived in 1974 and lasted about 9 years, which sounds like a long run until you realize most kids never saw it on the shelf. Fruit Brute was the monster nobody rooted for. The werewolf lacked the charm of the Count and the strangeness of Frankenberry. He just stood on the box looking like he had somewhere better to be. General Mills brought the other monsters back as seasonal releases. Fruit Brute got a brief quiet revival under a different name decades later, and then vanished again. The grocery store of the 1970s followed a different logic. Snacks were not sorted by health claim or ingredient philosophy. They were sorted by color, sugar content, and which cartoon character was yelling loudest from the box. A child walked into that aisle and made decisions based on the wrapper, on what a friend had mentioned during recess, on what looked new this week. There was no website to consult, no parent standing behind you reading the label. You picked it up, dropped it in the cart, and found out what it tasted like at 3:15 that afternoon. Half the brands that filled those shelves are gone now. Not because they tasted bad, because the companies that made them got acquired, merged, restructured, and decided that a dozen varieties of caramel popcorn was 11 too many. Number 16. Buckwheat's Cereal. General Mills made a buckwheat-based cereal with maple flavoring and sold it alongside the big names through most of the 1970s. The taste was darker and earthier than the sugar bombs on either side of it on the shelf. Your grandfather probably liked it better than you did. You ate it when the kaboom ran out and there was nothing else in the cabinet. It turned the milk a muddy brown, which was either interesting or off-putting depending on your age. Buckwheats never had a flashy mascot or a toy inside. It had flavor, and in the 1970s, cereal market, flavor without a cartoon was a hard sell. General Mills pulled it and nobody organized a rally. Number 15, Whip and Chill. Jell-O sold this instant mousse mix that you made with milk and a hand mixer. Chocolate, vanilla, strawberry, and a few rotating flavors. The result was lighter than pudding and denser than whipped cream, and it set in the refrigerator in about half an hour. After school, it became a solo project. You mixed it, poured it into whatever bowl was clean, and ate it before it fully set because waiting was not something you were built for in the 4th grade. That half-set version had a texture nothing else replicated. Not quite solid, not quite liquid, somewhere in between. Jell-O stopped making it, and no pudding cup or yogurt on the market has matched that specific in-between consistency. Number 14, Sir Grapefellow cereal. General Mills released this in 1972 alongside a companion called Baron von Redberry, and the concept was a breakfast cereal arms race. Sir Grapefellow was grape-flavored oat cereal with grape starburst marshmallows. The mascot was a British World War I flying ace with a monocle and a scarf, locked in an eternal dogfight with the Baron, who sold the berry version. The commercials showed them chasing each other across the sky, each one insisting his cereal was better. It was breakfast repackaged as rivalry, aimed directly at 7-year-olds. The cereal tasted like grape soda poured over oats, which was either wonderful or alarming depending on your palate. The marshmallows turned the milk purple. Your mother regretted the purchase before you finished the first bowl. General Mills pulled both cereals by 1975. 3 years. The dogfight ended and nobody won. But the thinking behind it is what matters. General Mills was willing to launch 2 products at the same time and let children decide the winner. That kind of gamble does not happen in the cereal aisle anymore. Today, the shelf is managed by data, by focus groups, by quarterly projections. In 1972, someone in Minneapolis said, "Let us put a British flying ace on a grape cereal and see what happens." That spirit disappeared along with the cereal. Sir Grapefellow and Baron von Redberry are among the rarest cereal boxes in the collector market today. A sealed box in good condition has sold for hundreds of dollars. Nobody is eating what is inside. They are paying for the memory of a time when breakfast could be that strange and that fearless. Number 13. Chuckles. 5 jelly candy pieces in a row, each a different color, each coated in granulated sugar. Lemon, orange, cherry, licorice, and lime. Everyone had a system. Some kids ate their least favorite first and saved the best for last. Others traded the licorice piece at school because the one kid who actually wanted it would give you something better in return. The texture was dense and gummy and the sugar coating crunched when you bit through. A pack cost a dime at the corner store and lasted the entire walk home. Chuckles had been around for decades before the 1970s and continued in some form after, but the era when every drugstore had a full rack of them on the counter is finished. Number 12. Planters Cheese Balls. The blue canister with the yellow lid. You peeled off the foil seal and the smell of artificial cheese filled the kitchen before you reached inside. The balls were light, airy, and coated in bright orange powder that transferred to everything you touched. Your fingers, the remote control, the couch cushion, your homework. You ate them by the fistful during afternoon cartoons, and the canister was shaped so your hand fit inside but could not quite reach the bottom. Those last few at the bottom required tipping the whole thing into your mouth. Planters stopped making them, and the reaction was louder than anyone expected. Adults who had grown up with the blue canister campaigned to bring them back. Planters eventually did a limited run years later, but the original canister from the 1970s and 1980s, the one with the foil seal and the orange dust, that is gone for good. Number 11. Snack Pack Pudding in the metal can. Hunt's sold individual servings of pudding in small, pull-top tins, and the act of opening one was its own ritual. the metallic pop when the lid came off, the ring of pudding stuck to the inside of the lid that you licked clean before touching the rest, the smooth, cold chocolate underneath. You ate it with a spoon if you were at the table. You ate it with your finger if nobody was watching. The cans switched to plastic cups by the mid-1980s and something changed. The pudding may have been the same formula. The experience was not. That metal can made it feel like you were opening something real, something solid. Plastic cups made it feel like leftovers. Number 10. Great Shakes. This was a milkshake in a cup. You bought the cup at the store, added milk at home, snapped the lid on, and shook it. The powder mixed with the milk and made something closer to flavored milk than an actual milkshake. But that distinction did not matter when you were 9. Chocolate, vanilla, strawberry. The cup was disposable, and the whole thing cost less than a real milkshake at any lunch counter. You shook it for 30 seconds, peeled back the tab, and drank it standing at the counter because sitting down would have been wasted time. The product vanished by the end of the decade. Instant milkshake in a disposable cup turned out to be the answer to a question not enough people were asking. The best after-school snack was never the one your mother wrote on the grocery list. It was the one you found yourself. The half bag of pretzels behind the canned soup, the last 2 slices of cheese in the deli drawer, the jar of peanut butter that was almost empty but not quite. Those discoveries taught you something about food that no recipe book ever could. You learned that eating does not have to be an event. It can be a quiet moment between school and dinner, standing at the counter, chewing something simple, answering to nobody. The 1970s were full of those moments. Nobody photographed them. Nobody posted them anywhere. You ate your snack, watched your show, and waited for the rest of the day to arrive. Number 9. The Triple-Decker Bar. Nestle built this candy bar in 3 visible layers: chocolate on top, peanut butter in the middle, a crispy wafer on the bottom. The cross-section was the selling point. 3 clean stripes, each one a different texture. It looked impressive when you bit into it, and for a few years in the 1970s, that was enough. The problem was structural. The layers separated when the bar got warm, and inside a book bag on a spring afternoon, it became a peanut butter mess inside the wrapper. Nestle pulled it, and the 3-layer concept drifted through the candy industry for years without anyone solving the engineering. The design was the advertisement, and the flaw was hiding inside the design. Number 8. Fruit Stripe Gum. The zebra on the package was striped, colorful, and impossible to miss at the checkout counter. Each stick promised a different fruit flavor, and each stripe was supposedly a distinct taste, though nobody could tell the difference. What everyone remembers is the window. For about 10 seconds after you put a piece in your mouth, Fruit Stripe was the best gum on the planet. Sweet, explosive, unmistakable. Then the flavor vanished completely. You were left chewing tasteless rubber, and nothing brought it back. Kids burned through entire packs chasing that 10-second burst, unwrapping a fresh piece before the last one finished dying. The company kept making it for decades, but the version with the original wrapper and the wild zebra that you grabbed at the register belongs to the 1970s. Number 7. Gatorgum. Somebody looked at Gatorade and decided it should be a chewing gum. The pitch was that you could chew your way to hydration, and in the late 1970s, that idea was just strange enough to land. It came in lemon lime and orange, same as the drink, and the flavor was salty sweet in a way that tasted like nothing else at the candy rack. You chewed it after playing outside, not because you believed it replaced water, but because it was genuinely different. The flavor held longer than Fruit Stripe, but shorter than anything Wrigley made. It disappeared in the early 1980s, and the entire concept of sports gum went with it. Number 6. Chipsters. Nabisco made these thin, crispy potato chip crackers and sold them in a canister shaped like what Pringles used. The texture landed somewhere between a chip and a cracker, and they shattered the second you bit down. You ate them by the stack after school, pulling one after another from the tube while doing homework or pretending to. The crumbs ended up everywhere. In the textbook, between the couch cushions, ground into the carpet. Nabisco positioned Chipsters as a Pringles competitor. But the market had room for one chip in a can, and Pringles had already claimed the space. Chipsters left the shelf and left nothing behind but crumbs in the carpet. Number 5. Necco wafers. The New England Confectionery Company had been pressing these chalky candy discs since before your grandparents were born, and by the 1970s they were a permanent fixture at every drugstore counter and movie theater lobby. 8 flavors in a wax paper roll: lemon, orange, lime, clove, cinnamon, wintergreen, licorice, and chocolate. You ate them slowly because they were dense and because rushing through a roll felt wasteful. The clove and licorice ones usually went last or got thrown away. Necco wafers outlasted wars, depressions, and decades of shifting tastes. They finally stopped production when the factory closed and the brand changed hands. A different company brought the name back in a limited way, but the original roll from the corner store counter belongs to a different century. Number 4. Deviled ham on saltines. Underwood made the spread in the small can with the red devil on the label. Your mother bought it because it was cheap and it kept you quiet for 20 minutes. You peeled back the lid, spread it on a saltine with a butter knife, and ate it standing at the counter with the afternoon light coming through the window. The taste was salty, peppery, and a little sweet, and the texture sat somewhere between pate and canned tuna. Nobody talked about what was in it. You did not ask. 1 can and a sleeve of crackers lasted 2 or 3 afternoons. Underwood still makes it. You can still find the red devil on the shelf. But the image of a kid standing barefoot in a kitchen spreading it on crackers after school, that picture belongs to the 1970s. Number 3. The Fluffernutter. Marshmallow fluff on one slice of white bread, peanut butter on the other, pressed together and eaten over the kitchen sink because it dripped. The combination had been around in New England for decades before the 1970s, but that era was its peak. Nobody counted sugar grams, and white bread was just called bread. The fluff came in a jar and you dug into it with a knife, watching the marshmallow stretch in long white strings. The mess was part of the experience. Your hands stuck together. The bread collapsed under too much filling. You ate it in 4 bites and washed it down with a glass of milk. The Fluffernutter did not vanish from the grocery store. It vanished from the routine. Somewhere between then and now, the after-school sandwich stopped being something kids made for themselves. Number 2. Vienna sausages straight from the can. Small, pale, packed in broth inside a pull-top tin. You opened the can, tipped them out, and ate them cold with your fingers standing in front of the refrigerator. No plate. No preparation. You did not heat them because that would have required effort, and the whole point was 0 effort. The taste was salty, soft, faintly smoky, and the texture was something you either accepted or refused. No middle ground. The cans are still on the bottom shelf of most grocery stores today, but a 10-year-old standing barefoot in the kitchen eating cold sausages from a tin at 3:30, that belongs to the 1970s. The snack survived. The moment did not. Number 1. Kool-Aid frozen in the ice cube tray. Nobody sold this. No company manufactured it. Your mother mixed a pitcher of Kool-Aid, poured it into the metal ice cube tray with the lever handle, and put it in the freezer. A few hours later, you had popsicles. They were rough at the edges and uneven in color, and they stained everything they touched. Your lips, your fingers, the front of your shirt. Cherry was red. Grape was purple. The orange one was the color of a traffic cone. You pulled the lever, cracked the tray, and took 2 cubes outside to sit on the porch while the afternoon turned into evening. No wrapper, no brand name, no jingle. Just your mother, a pitcher, a metal tray, and a freezer. That was the after-school snack that cost almost nothing and vanished from American kitchens not because anyone decided to stop making it, but because the metal ice cube trays disappeared first. The plastic ones came, then the automatic ice makers. And the frozen Kool-Aid went with the lever handle, quietly, the same way everything on this list went. Number 19. Leather britches. This was not a snack in the way a modern person thinks of a snack. But in the early 1960s, Mountain families pulled leather breeches off the string hanging from the porch ceiling and chewed on them the way a person today might chew on beef jerky. Leather breeches were green beans, threaded onto a long piece of string with a needle, then hung to air dry for weeks. The beans shriveled and turned brown and leathery. The name came from the way they looked, like tiny pairs of leather pants on a clothesline. The practice likely came from the Cherokee, though German settlers in the Palatinate had a similar tradition. By the 1960s, they were a winter staple in the mountains of North Carolina, Virginia, and Kentucky. When you were hungry between meals, you pulled a few off the string and chewed. They were tough and earthy and tasted like summer gone quiet. Most families kept several strings drying at once, each one holding enough beans to last a month. That was the whole point of them, not flavor, survival. The knowledge that when the snow came and the garden was dead and the nearest store was 12 miles of frozen road away, there was still food hanging from the ceiling. In Watauga County, North Carolina, a woman named Ora Mae Ward strung leather breeches on her front porch every August for 40 years. Her grandchildren would sit on the steps and help thread the beans, and she would tell them stories about the winters when the only vegetables came from that string. Those strings are gone from most porches now. The skill went with them. The grandchildren who sat on those steps are grandparents themselves now, and most of them have never threaded a single bean. But the taste, for anyone who remembers it, never left. It never will. Number 18. Tab. Coca-Cola launched Tab in 1963 as its first diet soda, and by the 1970s it owned the category. The can was pink and white, the sweetener was saccharin, and the calorie count sat printed in a circle on the front. 1. Women kept 6 packs of Tab in the refrigerator the way men kept beer. It was not just a drink. It was a statement about discipline in an era when watching your figure was a phrase people used without hesitation. The taste was sharp and metallic, nothing like Coca-Cola, and the loyalists did not love it despite that difference. They loved it because of it. Tab was its own thing. When the brand finally ended in 2020, the people who had stayed with it for decades said very little. They just went quiet. Number 14. Molasses on biscuits. A biscuit split in half, a pour of sorghum molasses into the open face of the bread, folded and eaten over the sink because it dripped. In the southern mountains, sorghum was sometimes called the poor people's sweetener, and that was accurate. A family in Harlan County, Kentucky could produce their own sorghum from a small plot of cane, and a quart jar of thick, dark syrup was worth more than most store-bought sweets. The molasses soaked into the soft biscuit quickly and had to be eaten fast before it ran. If you grew up in those mountains, you ate these before school and again when you came home in the afternoon. The biscuit cost almost nothing if a family used their own flour and lard. The sorghum was often bartered, grown locally, or carried from the general store for about 15 cents a quart in 1963. That was your whole season of cold afternoons. Number 20. Cornbread crumbled in buttermilk. This was the nighttime snack of the mountains. After supper, after the dishes were done, a man would crumble a piece of cold cornbread into a tall glass of buttermilk. He would eat it with a spoon. That was it. No recipe, no name, just cornbread and buttermilk in a glass. The cornbread softened. The buttermilk was tangy and cold. In the coal camps of McDowell County, West Virginia, men ate this every night of their lives. Their fathers had eaten it. Their grandfathers had eaten it. It was not discussed. It was not written down in any cookbook. You poured a glass. You crumbled the bread. You sat at the kitchen table in the quiet of a house, settling into sleep, and you ate something your family had been eating for generations. That mattered. Number 24. Planters cheese balls. The blue canister was the size of a coffee can, and inside were dozens of bright orange puffed cheese balls that left a film on your fingers so thick you could write your name on your jeans. The lid never sealed properly after the first opening, which meant the cheese balls got stale within a day, which meant you had to finish them in one sitting. Nobody complained. Planters called them a party snack, but they were solitary food. You sat on the couch with the canister between your knees and worked through them while watching television. When Planters discontinued them, The reaction was loud enough that the company brought them back for a limited run years later. That run sold out fast. Some things leave a hole bigger than the canister they came in. Number 23. Peanuts in a Coke bottle. Take a glass bottle of Coca-Cola. Drink a few sips from the neck to make room. Tear open a sleeve of salted peanuts and pour them straight in. Then tilt the bottle at 40 degrees and drink. That is a farmer's Coke. And the tradition goes back to at least the 1920s when packaged peanuts first started appearing beside the soda cooler at Southern general stores. Workers in the fields of Georgia and Alabama poured their peanuts in because they had dirty hands and no time to stop and eat separately. A snack and a drink became one thing: sweet, salty, fizzy, crunchy. The peanuts stayed crisp in the Coke, and each sip brought one or two along. By the 1960s, this tradition had moved from the fields to the front porch to the baseball game. If you grew up in the South, you learned it by watching a parent. Not one advertisement was ever made for it. Some things are passed down because your family passed them to you, and that is enough. Number 14. Sassafras tea. In the early spring, before the trees fully leafed out, children in the mountains dug sassafras roots from the edges of fields and woods. The roots were easy to spot because the whole plant smelled like root beer. You washed them, cut them into pieces, and boiled them in a pot of water until the liquid turned a deep reddish brown. Then you added sugar or honey and drank it warm or let it cool. Sassafras tea was free. It grew everywhere. And it tasted exactly like root beer because root beer was originally made from sassafras. In the 1960s, every child in rural Appalachia knew how to find a sassafras tree. They knew it by the smell, by the mitten-shaped leaves, by the way the bark peeled. Grandmothers said it purified the blood. Whether that was true did not matter. What mattered was that a child could walk into the woods with nothing and come back with something that tasted sweet and warm. That is what foraging meant to mountain children, not survival, discovery. Number 23. Fiddle Faddle. If you thought Cracker Jack owned the caramel popcorn market, Fiddle Faddle had something to say about that. It came in a flat box, coated heavier, with peanuts that showed up in real numbers. Lincoln Snacks made it, the same company behind Screaming Yellow Zonkers, and they knew the secret to caramel corn was the caramel, not the corn. Each piece had a glaze thick enough to catch light. Movie theaters never carried it, which kept it a grocery store snack, the kind you ate at the kitchen table on a Saturday afternoon with nothing planned. The brand survives in some form today, but the formula has shifted enough that anyone who tasted the original would notice the difference. Number 20. Lard and sugar bread. An open-faced slice of white bread spread with rendered lard and sprinkled with sugar. If you grew up in farm communities across Iowa, Illinois, and the hill country of Arkansas, this was the dessert that appeared when there was no dessert. The lard was always in the house because families kept their own hogs or bought it in 5-pound cans. Sugar cost about 8 cents a pound in 1965. Spread thin on lard-coated bread, a teaspoon of sugar went far and tasted richer than it had any right to. The lard kept the sugar from sliding off and melted slightly against the warmth of a hand. Historian Richard Willis recalled eating these on a Depression-era farm in Iowa, but the tradition carried well into the 1960s in households where the lard bucket never left the stovetop. Bread, fat, sugar. Your mother and grandmother both knew that was enough to get a child from 3 in the afternoon to supper time without complaint. Number 24. Moon pie and RC Cola. In 1961, you could walk into any general store in the mountains of Virginia, Tennessee, or Kentucky and buy both for a dime. The moon pie cost a nickel. The RC Cola cost a nickel. Together, they made what working people called the working man's lunch. The Chattanooga Bakery had been making moon pies since 1917. 2 round graham cracker cookies with marshmallow in the middle dipped in chocolate, vanilla, or banana coating. One moon pie had enough calories to carry a man through an afternoon of splitting wood or hauling rock. The RC Cola washed it down. This was not a treat. This was fuel, and for 10 cents, it was the cheapest fuel in Appalachia. Number 21. Choco Light. Nestlé made this bar, and the whole concept was air. The chocolate was aerated, full of tiny bubbles that made each piece lighter than it looked. You could snap a section off and it broke cleanly, like a piece of balsa wood dipped in cocoa. The texture sat somewhere between a standard chocolate bar and a wafer. People who tried it either loved the lightness or felt cheated by the missing density. Nestlé positioned it as the choice for people who wanted chocolate without the heaviness. That turned out to be a harder sell than it sounds because most chocolate lovers wanted exactly the heaviness Chocolite was trying to remove. The bar disappeared in the early 1980s without explanation, and nobody stepped in to fill the gap it left on the candy rack. Number 17. Cinnamon toast in the oven. White bread, buttered, dusted with cinnamon and sugar, slipped under the broiler or set flat in a low oven until the edges turned brown and the sugar formed a thin, crackling crust. The smell that came out of that oven reached every room in the house and brought you running without being called. In the farmhouses of southern Missouri and the small towns of western Tennessee, this was the Saturday afternoon snack, the one that meant there were a few spare minutes and enough sugar left in the canister. A loaf of bread cost 20 cents in 1965. The cinnamon lasted months. The whole thing was done in under 10 minutes and required nothing that wasn't already in the house. What you remember from those days isn't the recipe. They remember the smell, the sound of that sugar crust breaking when they bit into it, the warmth in their hands on a cold afternoon, the crust and the smell. That was childhood. Number 17. Sorghum taffy. In the early 1960s, sorghum syrup was still the primary sweetener in many mountain homes. Refined white sugar was expensive. Sorghum was not. Families grew their own cane, pressed it in a horse-drawn mill, and cooked the juice down into a dark, thick syrup. When there was extra sorghum, the women made taffy. They boiled the syrup with a splash of vinegar until it reached the hard crack stage, poured it onto a buttered platter, and waited until it was cool enough to handle. Then the pulling started. Two people would stretch and fold the candy between them until it turned from dark brown to pale golden and went stiff. They snapped it into pieces and wrapped each one in wax paper. In the mountains of eastern Tennessee, communities held taffy pulling parties in the fall. Young men and women paired off to pull the candy together. It was one of the few socially acceptable ways for unmarried people to hold hands. The taffy was the excuse. The company was the point. Number 22. Quisp. Quaker Oats introduced Quisp in the mid-1960s as a direct competitor to every sugar-loaded cereal fighting for attention on the Saturday morning cartoon block. The mascot was a pink alien from the planet Q who wore a propeller on his head and spoke in a voice that sounded like he had swallowed a bicycle horn. The cereal was a saucer-shaped piece of sweetened corn, light as air, and it dissolved in milk faster than you could eat it. That was part of the charm. You had to eat Quisp at top speed, and kids treated every bowl like a race against the clock. Quaker launched Quisp alongside a sibling brand called Quake, which had a caveman mascot, a denser crunch, and a bigger advertising push. The two cereals ran dueling television campaigns through the late 1960s and into the 1970s, each trying to outlast the other. Quaker eventually let consumers vote on which cereal survived. Quisp won the popular vote, but winning did not guarantee a permanent shelf. By the late 1970s, Quisp started disappearing from grocery stores across the country, turning up only in regions where loyalty ran deep enough to justify the stocking cost. It became a cereal you had to track down, and the tracking made it legendary. Whole conversations at office coffee pots revolved around where somebody had last spotted a box. Quaker brought it back decades later as an online exclusive, but clicking a button on a screen is not the same as rounding the corner on aisle 5 and seeing that pink alien grinning at you next to the Frosted Flakes. Number 18. Peanut butter on saltines. A jar of peanut butter, a sleeve of saltines, a knife or the back of a spoon. In 1965, a jar of Skippy peanut butter cost 79 cents. A box of saltines cost 23 cents. Together, they provided a week's worth of after-school snacks for under $1, which made them the reliable default in households from rural Ohio to the farms of western Kansas. The cracker had to be firm enough to hold the peanut butter without snapping, and if 3 saltines were stacked, they could be carried in one hand without losing any. If you grew up eating these, you probably still make them today without ever thinking to call it anything but a snack. No plate needed, no preparation beyond opening 2 packages, a box of crackers on the table, and a jar of peanut butter beside it. That was your whole afternoon after school. Number 18. Pawpaw fruit. Every September, in the shaded creek bottoms across Appalachia, the pawpaw trees dropped their fruit. Children knew exactly where the trees were. They guarded those locations the way other children guarded a fishing hole. The fruit was roughly the size of a mango, with a thin green skin that bruised easily. Inside, the flesh was yellow and custard soft, with a flavor somewhere between banana and mango. You ate it raw, standing under the tree, spitting out the large brown seeds. There was no way to store a pawpaw. It ripened for about a week and then it was gone. That narrow window made it precious. In Mingo County, West Virginia, families planned their September around pawpaw season. Grandmothers made pawpaw bread. Children ate them until their stomachs ached. And then the season ended. The pawpaw was never cultivated commercially because it could not survive shipping. Too soft, too fragile, too brief. The only people who ever tasted it were the people who lived near the trees. In the hollows along the Tug Fork River, a man named Dewey Blankenship kept a pawpaw grove on his property that his grandfather had tended before him. Every September, neighbors walked to his land with paper sacks, and he let them pick without charge. He never sold a single fruit. He said it was not his to sell. The trees were there before his family arrived, and they would be there after he was gone. Your children will probably never taste a pawpaw. That is not because the trees disappeared. It is because nobody walks to them anymore. Number 17. Pop Rocks. General Foods released Pop Rocks in 1975, and within 2 years, every elementary school in the country had its own version of the same rumor. The candy was carbonated. You tore open the packet, poured the crystals onto your tongue, and the tiny pieces crackled and popped like a mouthful of static electricity. The sensation was unlike anything else on the candy rack. Kids genuinely were not sure if it was safe, and that uncertainty was the whole appeal. You ate Pop Rocks not because they tasted good, but because they felt dangerous. Then the story spread. A kid named Mikey, the same boy from the Life cereal commercial, had supposedly eaten Pop Rocks while drinking a soda, and his stomach had exploded. It never happened. Mikey was fine and completely unaware that his name had become the centerpiece of the most successful piece of playground misinformation in the country. But the rumor moved through schoolyards at a speed no adult could match, delivered with the total conviction that only a 10-year-old can manage. General Foods responded with something no candy company had done before. They took out full-page ads in major newspapers. They sent the inventor on a speaking tour. They wrote letters to school principals across the nation, all delivering one message. The candy is safe, no child has been harmed, stomachs do not work that way. The campaign calmed things down, but did not save the product. General Foods pulled Pop Rocks in the early 1980s. The brand resurfaced years later in a quieter form. It still crackles, but the fear is gone, and without the fear, it is just sugar on your tongue. In 1975, it was a dare you took with your whole mouth. Number 19. Fried biscuit donuts. In the coal mining communities of southwestern Virginia and the hollows of West Virginia, when a grandmother made biscuits, she sometimes fried a few extras. She pinched off rounds of biscuit dough and dropped them into hot lard in a cast iron pot until they puffed and turned golden. Then she shook them in a paper bag with powdered sugar or cinnamon sugar. They came out hot, dense, faintly sweet, with an outside that crackled and an inside that steamed when pulled apart. These weren't donuts the way anyone would buy in a shop. They had no holes, no glaze, no frosting. They were something better, warm, homemade, nearly free. And if you ever pulled one apart while it was still hot, you know exactly what that steam smelled like. and they smelled up the whole house when that cast iron pot got hot. Miners' wives had been making these since at least the early 1900s, and by the time the 1960s arrived, the recipe was still being passed down without ever being written. No cookbook taught it. A daughter learned it standing at the stove. A woman in Buchanan County, Virginia, described the recipe to Foxfire Field researchers in 1975 as simply, heat the grease, drop the dough, roll in sugar. That was the entire instruction. The lard she fried them in was left over from breakfast. The dough was whatever remained after the biscuits were cut. Nothing measured, nothing wasted. There is something worth understanding about food from coal country. It is not sentimental about itself. It did not need to be. The families who ate these fried biscuit donuts weren't romanticizing hard times. They were just finding a way to make something good out of what was in the kitchen on a light pay afternoon. The women who made these didn't call themselves resourceful. They called themselves mothers. And the children who grew up eating them, the people who are your grandparents now, those generations who are grandparents themselves now, remembered the taste for the rest of their lives. Number 22, cracklin' bread. Every fall, when the temperature dropped below freezing and the hog killing started, the women saved the cracklings. Cracklings were the crispy, golden pieces of pork skin and fat left over after the lard was rendered. You could eat them straight, and people did. The real prize, though, was cracklin' bread. Cornmeal, buttermilk, a pinch of salt, and a handful of those cracklings baked in a cast iron skillet greased with lard. The bread came out dense and golden, with pockets of crispy pork through every bite. Children ate it after school. Men carried a wrapped piece in their coat pocket to the field. It did not need butter. The cracklings had already given it all the salt and fat a person could want. In the mountains of West Virginia, families waited all year for hog killing day, and the cracklin' bread was the first reward. Number 26, space food sticks. Pillsbury made these right after the moon landing, and the timing was everything. They were chewy, rod-shaped bars wrapped in foil, and they came in chocolate, peanut butter, and caramel. The packaging leaned hard into the space program, and every kid who watched the Apollo missions on television wanted one. They were not good the way a candy bar is good. They were dense and waxy and stuck to your teeth. But eating one made you feel like an astronaut, which was worth more than flavor when you were 9 years old. Pillsbury leaned on NASA credibility in every ad. By the early 1980s, the space craze had cooled, and so did sales. The sticks vanished along with the dream. Number 25, wacky wafers. Wonka made these, and they were exactly what they sounded like. Big, flat, round candy discs about the size of a silver dollar, stacked in a clear cellophane tube. They came in fruit flavors. Watermelon was the one everybody wanted, and banana sat at the bottom because nobody picked it first. There was no chocolate, no filling, no gimmick, just a thick disc of hard candy that dissolved on your tongue if you were patient or cracked between your molars if you were not. You could buy a tube for a few cents, and it lasted longer than most candy because the discs were thick enough to resist a child's chewing speed. Wonka stopped making them, and nobody else ever made anything quite like them. The checkout lane was a battlefield. Every grocery store in the 1970s kept a rack of candy, gum, and snack bags right at the register, positioned at a child's eye level while the parent stood in line with a full cart and a short temper. The entire snack industry understood something about that moment. You had maybe 40 seconds before the belt started moving and the cashier rang the total. 40 seconds to grab, plead, negotiate, and either win or lose. More brand loyalty was built in that narrow strip of retail space than in any television commercial. The companies that won the checkout lane won the decade, and the ones that lost it disappeared so completely that most adults today cannot remember the name. Only the wrapper. Number 21. Cornbread crumbled in buttermilk. In the hills of eastern Kentucky and the river bottoms of western North Carolina, this was called crumble in, or just something to tide you over. A wedge of leftover cornbread, cold or still warm from the cast iron skillet, crumbled into a tall drinking glass with cold buttermilk poured over the top. You ate it with a spoon. The buttermilk was sour and thin, and turned the cornbread into something almost pudding-like after 2 minutes. Some families used whole milk instead, which they called sweet milk in those mountains. In 30 years of collecting oral histories from Appalachian families, food writer Ronnie Lundy found that not one person with mountain roots failed to mention this tradition. It was that universal. A box of cornmeal cost a dime in 1963. Buttermilk was free if a family kept a cow, and most farm families did. This was the evening snack for generations across those mountains, and the people who grew up eating it will tell you it remains one of the best things they have ever tasted. Number 25. Pickled eggs. Cecil Fugate was not the only man in eastern Kentucky selling them. Every country store, every gas station from Harlan to Hazard had a jar on the counter. Hard-boiled eggs, peeled and dropped into a brine of vinegar, salt, sugar, and pickling spices. They sat in that liquid for weeks. The whites turned translucent. The yolks went dense and creamy. A man could buy one for a nickel, eat it in 3 bites, and keep working for another 4 hours without his stomach growling. Just a jar, a pair of tongs, and a piece of wax paper if the store owner felt generous. In the coal camps of Harlan County, miners bought them by the half dozen before heading underground. The vinegar kept them from spoiling in the heat of the tunnels. Your grandfather probably ate 100 of them and never once called it a snack. He called it getting by. Number 19. The Reggie Bar. In 1978, Reggie Jackson told a reporter that if he played in New York, they would name a candy bar after him. He got traded to the Yankees. They named a candy bar after him. Standard Brands produced it, a round disc of chocolate, peanuts, and caramel wrapped in orange foil with Jackson's face on the front. On opening day at Yankee Stadium that season, the team handed free Reggie bars to every fan in the stands. When Jackson hit a home run, thousands of those bars came raining down onto the field from the upper deck. The candy was ordinary. Nothing remarkable about the flavor. But the story behind it turned every bite into something bigger than a snack. The bar lasted only a few years before production stopped. Snacks in the 1970s did something that modern snacks have mostly stopped doing. They marked time. You did not eat a space food stick on a random Tuesday. You ate it the week after a launch because the wrapper reminded you of something you had seen on the evening news. You did not tear open a bag of pizza spins unless you were on the floor of somebody's den watching cartoons on a Saturday morning. The snack was tied to a moment, and the moment was tied to who you were at that age. Today, everything is available everywhere, always, in every size and every flavor. Nothing is scarce, nothing is seasonal, nothing is regional, and because of that, nothing sticks the way a Reggie bar stuck to the kid who found one rolling under the bleachers in the Bronx. Number 15. Dandelion greens with vinegar and bacon grease. In April and May, the front yards of rural families across Appalachia became a free food source. The young dandelion greens, picked before they flowered, the older ones turned too bitter, got washed and dressed in a skillet with hot bacon grease and a splash of apple cider vinegar, sometimes with a little sugar to balance the acid. In 1937, the USDA published a bulletin recommending dandelion greens for low-income households, calling them among the most nutrient-rich wild plants available. Your grandmothers had understood this for generations before any government publication said so. A woman in Mingo County, West Virginia, described going out to pick greens with her mother in the 1940s and continuing the tradition into the 1960s, not because times were hard, but because that was what spring tasted like, free and in season and better than most things your family could have bought. Number 16. Poke salad. In April, when the first green shoots pushed through the forest floor, families went out to pick poke. The young leaves of the pokeweed plant were free food, growing wild along fence rows and creek banks. Pokeweed is toxic, though. The mature leaves and berries contain compounds that can make a person seriously ill. The trick was to pick only the youngest shoots, no more than 6 inches tall, and boil them in 3 changes of water to draw out the toxins. After the 3rd boiling, the greens were safe. People ate them fried in bacon grease with a little salt, sometimes with a fried egg on top. In the coal camps of eastern Kentucky, poke salad was the first fresh green food people ate after a long winter of canned goods and dried beans. It tasted like spring. It tasted like the end of something hard and the beginning of something easier. Number 16, Razzles. The slogan was the product. First, it is a candy, then it is a gum. You popped a Razzle into your mouth, and for about 10 seconds, it was a hard, tangy, fruit-flavored disc. Then the texture shifted. The candy softened and became bubble gum right there on your tongue, and the transition was the whole reason anyone bought them. Nobody chewed Razzles for the gum quality, which was poor. The bubbles were small, the flavor faded fast, and the chew went stiff within minutes. But that moment of transformation, those 10 seconds when one thing became another, was enough to keep kids reaching for the pack. Grape and orange were the strongest flavors. Everything else was a variation on the same trick, and the trick never got old. Number 15, chicken in a biscuit. Nabisco put these out in the mid-1960s, and the name alone raised questions that nobody at the company ever bothered to answer. What chicken? What biscuit? And why was biscuit spelled wrong? None of it mattered once you opened the box. The crackers were thin, salty, and seasoned with something that tasted like chicken bouillon crossed with onion powder and a compound that science had not fully named. They were addictive in the way that only heavily seasoned crackers can be. You ate one, and then the box was empty, and then you felt strange about yourself. The brand still exists, but the current formula has softened. The 1970s version had a sharper, saltier bite that the new one does not reach. Number 22, saltine crackers and milk. A handful of saltines broken into a bowl, warm milk poured over the top, a pinch of sugar if the mother was feeling generous. The crackers soaked up the milk and turned soft enough to eat with a spoon. If you grew up in Milltown households across New England and rural Pennsylvania, a variation on bread and milk for families who kept saltines in the house and sometimes ran short of bread. In the 1960s, a box of saltines cost about 23 cents. A quart of milk was 25 cents. That is an afternoon snack for a family of 4 for under 50 cents. Children in the textile towns of the Piedmont called it stewed crackers. Some families added a little butter while the milk was still warm. The crackers dissolved at the edges first, leaving a thick paste at the bottom of the bowl that tasted better than it had any right to. No stove required, no pots to wash. Those were the two best qualities a snack could have. Number 13, persimmon pudding. The wild persimmon trees across the hills of southern Appalachia produced small orange fruit that looked inviting and could ruin your afternoon. An unripe persimmon contains so much tannin that a single bite will pucker your mouth shut. Mountain people knew to wait. They waited for the first hard frost because the cold broke down the tannins and turned the fruit honey sweet. After the frost, families collected persimmons by the bucketful. The fruit was mashed through a colander to remove the seeds, and the pulp was mixed with eggs, milk, sugar, and flour, then baked into a pudding that came out dense, dark, and sweet. Not quite pumpkin, not quite sweet potato. Something entirely its own. In Grayson County, Virginia, women competed over whose persimmon pudding was the best. There were no written recipes. Every family had its own version, passed down through generations, adjusted by feel and the specific sweetness of that year's frost. The pudding was never sold. It was never served in any restaurant. It existed only in the kitchens of people who knew where the trees grew and had the patience to wait for the cold. In Floyd County, Virginia, a woman named Edith Spangler baked her persimmon pudding in the same brown stoneware dish her mother had used. She walked the ridgeline above her house every November, checking the trees, pressing her thumb into each fruit to test the softness. The year the frost came late, she waited until December. She said you could not rush a persimmon and you could not rush the Lord, and they were often on the same schedule. That patience was the ingredient no recipe could capture. Number 20, snack pack pudding in the tin can. Before the plastic cup, Hunt's packed its pudding in small tin cans with pull-top lids that peeled back like a sardine tin. You hooked your finger through the ring, pulled until the lid curled off, and scraped the pudding out with a spoon that clinked against the metal with every bite. Chocolate was the standard. Butterscotch was the dark horse. Vanilla existed, but nobody reached for it on purpose. The tin made the pudding taste different than anything from a mixing bowl, the same way a soda tastes different from a glass bottle than from a plastic one. Hunt's switched to plastic cups in the mid-1980s, and the product survived, but the experience did not. The spoon never sounded the same. Number 16. Raw potato slices with salt. A potato pulled from the root cellar, rinsed, sliced thin with a paring knife, laid out on a plate, and salted. If you grew up in farm communities across the Plains states, Nebraska, Kansas, Missouri, raw potato slices were the simple, free snack that appeared when everything else was put away and supper was still 2 hours out. Children ate them standing at the kitchen counter. The potato tasted starchy and faintly sweet when truly fresh. The salt brought out something that tasted almost buttery. No cooking, no heating, no waiting. A 10-year-old could make this in under 3 minutes. Potatoes kept in the root cellar from October through February, the most reliable thing in a house where other items ran out. A 10-pound bag of potatoes cost 49 cents in 1963. That is a month's worth of afternoon snacks for almost nothing. Nobody wrote this down as a recipe, and if your grandmother made it, she didn't need to. That is the list. 30 snacks that used to be waiting for you at 3:15, and now they are not. If this is your first time here, hit subscribe. I do this every week. Now try something. Make a fluffernutter. Freeze some Kool-Aid in whatever tray you have. Open a can of Vienna sausages and eat them standing up. Tell me in the comments which one of these you reached for first when you walked through that door after school. I am James, and I will see you in the next one.